Citizens will have to show government-issued photo identification to cast a ballot.
Simply whip that out and say, I am James R. Perry.
15 states now require a photo ID.
Here I am.
Voting is such a fundamental right.
There are people in state government who do not want you to vote.
Here I am.
Who gets to vote and how?
That we want our elections to be clean and fair.
Any benefit of the doubt should go to the voter.
Here I am.
It was to make it harder for people of color.
We are fighting for rights that came through the blood.
Use of race at the drop of a hat.
It can't be given up now.
Good to have you with us tonight, folks. Thanks for watching. Well, we're less than a week away. You know what we're asking folks to do? Do something out of the ordinary. We're asking them to get in their cars and drive to somewhere that they normally don't do, and then stand in line and then vote. You know, in this push-button mentality society we live in, where iPhones have everything at our fingertips, you mean I gotta go vote? That's kind of the feeling you get when you talk to some folks. But the bottom line here is that we have to understand what is at stake and what has happened leading up to the vote. It's scurrilous. It is scurrilous what's going on in America. The results of Tuesday's midterm elections are going to come down to really one thing. No matter where you go all over the country, you hear, well, it's all about turnout. I was in Kentucky the other day. Well, it's all about turnout. Been in Michigan, been in Ohio, been in Wisconsin, been in Minnesota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa. Well, it's all about turnout. Everybody's got the same story. It's all about turnout. Well, then turn out if you care. There are plenty of polls and projection models out there that say, well, the reality is the vote is going to be determined by who actually decides to get in their car and drive to somewhere that they normally don't go to on a routine basis, stand in line, and then care about the country. Republicans have been doing everything in their power to make sure that you stay in your routine, to keep the Democratic voters away from the polls. Now, if you're running for office in the state of Georgia, I have to ask you, would this infuriate you? Earlier this year in the state of Georgia, organizers in the state registered a phenomenal number, 90,000 people. They packed the big house, okay? These folks had never voted before. A massive voter registration in the state of Georgia, 90,000 people. And a lot of them were people of color or under the age of 25. In August, organizers noticed, hey, there's 40,000 of those registrations. They're gone. They vanished from the state's database. Now, would that make you feel really good about what's happening in your state if that happened? Would it really motivate you to go out and register more people? Nearly all of those belong to people of color in Democratic-leaning areas around Atlanta, Savannah, and also Columbus. Now, if you're a Republican and you are a member of the party of Lincoln, you should be absolutely furious that this happened, that someone's right has been taken away from them because of a computer glitch. You know, we do internet banking in America. That's kind of normal, but we certainly can't vote online, can we? I refuse to believe that what happened and unfolded in Georgia is just a coincidence. Because, you see, on Tuesday, a judge denied a petition from civil rights advocates to force Georgia's Secretary of State to process the missing registrations. So one judge, a man with that much power, said to hell with it on those 90,000 folks, to hell with it on those 40,000 lost registrations. It don't matter. We're going to have this election down here in Georgia anyway. Oh, it doesn't stop there. In the state of Texas, a strict voter ID law could potentially disenfranchise nearly 600,000 voters on Election Day. Now, I remember a few months ago we were down in Texas and we did a town hall meeting and we did a focus group. And to a T, all of those folks in that focus group told us that Texas is going to turn blue. The Democrats have the demographics on their side, that this is going to happen. So doesn't it make sense with one big swath, they better pass a law that will take out 600,000 folks? A disproportionate percentage of those voters are African American or Hispanic. Now, if you're still wondering how hard is it to get an ID, take a look at this.
I've gone twice to get the voter ID card.
So you go in May to get the card that's required, and they tell you they're out of it.
Yeah, Bryan Pruitt said they were out. And I went, this is ridiculous. You offered them. Now all of a sudden you done ran out. May I went. July I went. I know the days.
Don't you kind of get the feeling that this election just isn't about a bunch of governors trying to save their rear end and taking control of the United States Senate, which the Republicans really want because it's all about power? See, Republicans know that the midterms will really take shape and maybe determine the fate of the 2016 presidential elections.
What would you rather have if you're a Republican candidate and the nominee for president? Would you rather have Rick Scott in Florida overseeing the voting mechanism or Charlie Crist? Would you rather have Scott Walker in Wisconsin overseeing the voting mechanism, or would you rather have Mary Burke? Who would you rather have in Ohio? John Kasich or Ed Fitzgerald? Fact is, if you're just a pragmatist and you don't really care about what happens in the states, you're going to care about who's running those states in November of 2016. What kind of political apparatus they set up and what kind of governmental apparatus they set up to ensure a full and fair election in 2016. All of those things are incredibly important.
They sure as hell are. I mean, it's amazing how Governor Christie has come to the conclusion, let's see, on teachers he got rid of, he's now an Ebola expert. And, he's just come to the conclusion that everybody who's running for governor against his people are so damn corrupt they could not run an election. So we better make sure Rick Scott and John Kasich and Scott Walker and Snyder and all these guys are overlooking the election, because that's the only way it's going to be fair. But he can't find one Democrat in this country who has gone along with the voter suppression that the Republicans have put up state by state. Christie is right. It's an incredibly important election. Republicans want to make all the rules, and the governors that Christie listed in that soundbite, they have led the charge when it comes to voter suppression. In March, Scott Walker in Wisconsin signed a bill eliminating absentee voting on weekends ahead of elections in Wisconsin. Now, why would a guy on the party of Lincoln do something like that? Well, he's not alone. You see, in February, John Kasich signed bills in Ohio eliminating the number of early voting and registration days. Now, why would a guy on the party of Lincoln do something like that? And in 2012, can we remember that Florida had the worst voter lines in the country thanks to Rick Scott? But just remember, according to the guy across the street here in New Jersey, you've got to have these guys in charge if you're going to have a good election. However, this year, Scott is in trouble, which explains why Rick Scott in Florida is suddenly starting to say stuff like this.
Well, we're going to win because if you have an absentee ballot, if you know anybody that does, get them to vote it today. Go do early voting right now. Let's get everyone to vote. Get out the vote. If you have an absentee ballot, vote it. If you're early voting, go to vote today.
Today, what we're doing, we're getting the vote out. We are going to make sure if you have an absentee ballot, we're going to make sure you go vote it. You can vote right next door. Go out and vote today.
That is just a classic soundbite right there. Did you see Rick Scott standing there saying, go out to vote early, and early voting is what it's all about? And then Christie is standing next to him and looks like he's about ready to throw up. No, wait a minute. That's really not the plan. We really don't want him to do that. Settle down here, Ricky boy. I'm down here stumping for you. This is about power. This is about control of the legislative body. This is about the Republicans in a timely fashion over the last 4 years using every legislative method they have to make sure they can massage the numbers and the turnout so they will get the victory and get the power. That's what this is about. Now, if you're a red-blooded American, that should infuriate you. The legislation is right there. The suppression is there. If someone were to register your son or daughter under the age of 25, and then all of a sudden their name has been purged, would you feel like you have an obligation as a parent to jump into this thing and make sure it's right? You can. Yesterday, I talked about how lawmakers have voted themselves a raise over the years. You can vote justice next Tuesday. You can make sure that you get a raise, too, because there is one party that will stand with you and fight for you, and that is the Democrats. And that's not partisan talk. That's a fact. There's no Democrats in America that have said, you know what, we need to really cut these hours, we need to cut these polling places, we need to cut the days, we need to shut off weekends. You can't find a Democrat in America that will do that. But you can find a hell of a lot of Republicans, and they all happen to be governors. And they've all pushed legislation to do just that. And now they have the audacity to send Christie all over the country stumping for these guys, saying, you know what, if you don't elect these guys, we're not going to have a good election. And in 2016, he shows us the playbook. In 2016, we got to have these guys in charge so we can make sure we can get Florida if Rick Scott's governor. We can make sure we can get Ohio. I have said on this program repeatedly that one of the most important elections in this country is the Secretary of State's job in the state of Ohio. Get your cell phones out. I want to know what you think. Tonight's question, do you think this will be a fair election? Text A for yes, text B for no to 67622. You can always go to our blog at ed.msnbc.com, and we'll bring you the results later on in the show. I challenge anyone watching tonight. I want to be corrected. I know I'm right, but I challenge anyone watching tonight to bring me the name anywhere, state level, county level, federal level. Give me the name of a Democrat who has wanted to cut days and hours of early voting. Joining me tonight is Senator Barbara Boxer of California. Senator, good to have you with us tonight. What can be done, Senator? What can be done to turn this tide?
Listen to you where you lay out the facts, whether they're Republicans, Democrats, or independents. If they cherish the right to vote, if they believe that the right to vote is what's fundamental to our democracy, they should vote Democratic. Ed, there are 7 horrible laws on the books, very bad voter suppression, voter ID, the worst kind, and you focused on Texas. There are others. Every one of those, every single one of those signed by a Republican governor. This is one of the biggest issues of this election, of our time. And, you know, I hate the fact that people say, well, this is an off-year election. It isn't presidential. Everything is at stake, including our democracy, the right to vote. And the way we send a message, real simple, we can talk about it. More important is we vote. We all vote. Everyone who cherishes that right to vote, get out there and defy the pundits who say, oh, it's just going to be terribly low turnout. We have the power to change it. And this issue, there are many issues on the line. We know that. The fair shot agenda, equal pay for equal work, minimum wage, reducing interest rates on college loans, all those are very important. But this one, the party that stands for the right to vote is the Democratic Party, the party that is trying to suppress the vote. We saw Dr. Christie talk about that. We know it's a fact. The Republican Party, it is so sad to say, the party of Lincoln has taken this approach. They can't win on the issues, so they're trying to stop people from getting to the polls. By the way, did you hear about that 93-year-old veteran who tried to vote in Texas? Did you read about that?
I did.
He went to the post. He goes there. He has his expired driver's license because the guy's 93. No good.
Well,
he lost his right to vote. He lost his right to vote.
You have to have power in the legislative body to do something about this on a federal level.
Yes.
So obviously Tuesday's huge. Let's say the legislative power swings to the Democrats. What happens?
Well, there's several of us that have bills. I'm going to drop a new bill that combines 2 House bills, the Right to Vote Act, which basically says, okay, states, if you want voter ID, they have to be offered free and on time. And if you're forcing someone to go buy their birth certificate, you have to foot the bill. And if your law is so difficult that people can't do it, then they can go and they can vote. And they can sign an affidavit that they are who they are and they live where they say they live under penalty of law. And it's a stiff fine if anyone lies, $250,000 or 5 years in prison or both. So we cannot sit back now, Ed, We need to hold control of the United States Senate, and we have to hope we can gain control of the House, bar that, keep our losses to a minimum there. And it is up to us. It is up to us.
Senator Harry Reid, the Democratic leader, Senate Majority Leader, sent an email to the Progressive Change Campaign Committee's 1 million members, and he said this: a Republican House and Senate could go beyond shutting down the government. They could waste months of our lives on impeachment. What's your response to that?
No
you
doubt.
agree with that?
Well, I do. I've been saying it for a long time because I've been around for a while, and I hear what is being said, and I know that this is on the agenda. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. And that ties right into the voter suppression, because if you keep Democrats home because you don't want them to vote and they can't get to vote, you got a better shot at controlling the Senate, and they're not going to care about raising the minimum wage. They're not going to care about lowering student loan rates. They're not going to care about anything that matters to the middle class. They'll give the tax breaks to the millionaires and the billionaires, and then they'll pass a national voter suppression law. And yes, they will look at impeachment. I believe that.
Senator
you haven't heard much from Boehner. He's going to sue the president. That's just the start.
Senator Barbara Boxer, California, good to have you with us tonight. I appreciate your time on this issue. Thank you. Joining me now is Ari Melber, who is the co-host of MSNBC's The Cycle, 3 o'clock Eastern here on MSNBC. You just got back from Texas. Some of the sound that you came back with was actually startling. What struck you?
Yeah, I was down in Dallas and Fort Worth there over the weekend and early vote locations on Monday, and we saw two things, Ed. Number one, there is a mobilization going on. You've reported on it. We saw Freedom Sunday organizers in the church. They're commemorating the 50th anniversary of Freedom Summer. They're calling out voter ID from the head of the church and saying this is a racist targeting and we need to stand up to it. That you could say is positive. That's a backlash. But we also saw, you played some of it, we saw voters who had the right documentation, went down to the local ID issuing agency there in Texas and were told, oh, we don't have IDs. We ran out. You have to come back later. And let's be clear, for people who don't already have these IDs, some people drive great. Some people don't. We have people who are seniors, who have a medical condition. And so for them, having to go 2-3 times just to get an ID to have to vote in 2014, when, as you know and as you've reported, we've been doing elections for a long time in this country, hundreds of years without requiring this kind of photo ID.
So this has struck a new kind of passion with voters in Texas, you think?
I think so, and I think this is also, of course, where Eric Holder's Justice Department did win in using the Voting Rights Act to find that it was a poll tax. You got Senator Boxer here breaking some news on the Ed Show. She's telling you, okay, she's going to introduce a bill to try to say, at least at the federal type of elections, we're not going to allow anything that operates as a poll tax that costs money. Texas made a big show of saying, well, some people can get these IDs for free. Yeah, some people can, but others can't. And there's not supposed to be any price on voting in this country. People died to get us to this point.
Senator Boxer's intentions, well-intended, no doubt about it, but be aware you have to have the legislative power to be able to do something like that. There's only one party on record that would do something like that. Do voters in Texas get that?
I heard a lot of folks who did get that. But I also think you have to look at, I interviewed Congressman Joaquin Castro, who said he wants the feds to come in and audit the impact, measure it, and find out what the depressive level of turnout is. And that could ultimately go to the Supreme Court. Let's remember, something messed up here that gets people mad as they look to next Tuesday is you have a court who said this Texas voter ID law is illegal, is discriminatory, is a poll tax. That has not been overturned. What the Supreme Court conservative majority said was, well, we'll see about that, but we're going to let this play out as the law this week. And in a year or so, if this reaches the Supreme Court, they might even overturn it. In the meantime, what you need is, as you said from the beginning, you need people to turn out to make sure they stand up to this if folks are trying to suppress the vote.
All right, Melber, good to have you with us.
Thank you
so much. You bet. Remember to answer tonight's question there at the bottom of the screen. Share your thoughts with us on Twitter at Ed Show. Like us on Facebook. We appreciate that. We always want to know what you think. Coming up, union supporters fight to paint the country blue. James Hoffa joins me next. Plus, damage control. Scott Walker's new ad fights for women's rights, but the governor's voting history says otherwise. Keep it here. We're right back. Turnout. I was in Kentucky the other day. Well, it's all about turnout. Been in Michigan, been in Ohio, been in Wisconsin, been in Minnesota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa. Well, it's all about turnout. Everybody's got the same story. It's all about turnout. Well, then turn out if you care. There are plenty of polls and projection models out there that say, well, the reality is the vote is going to be determined by who actually decides to get in their car and drive to somewhere that they normally don't go to on a routine basis, stand in line, and then care about the country. Republicans have been doing everything in their power to make sure that you stay in your routine, to keep the Democratic voters away from the polls. Now, if you're running for office in the state of Georgia, I have to ask you, would this infuriate you? Earlier this year in the state of Georgia, organizers in the state registered a phenomenal number, 90,000 people. They packed the big house, okay? These folks had never voted before. A massive voter registration in the state of Georgia, 90,000 people. And a lot of them were people of color or under the age of 25.
Texans will have to show government-issued photo identification to cast a ballot.
Simply whip that out and say, I am James R. Perry.
15 states now require a photo ID.
Here I am.
Voting is such a fundamental right.
There are people in state government who do not want you to vote.
Here I am.
Who gets to vote and how?
That we want our elections to be clean and fair.
Any benefit of the doubt should go to the voter.
Here I am.
It was to make it harder for people of color.
We are fighting for rights that came through the blood.
Use of race at the drop of a hat.
It can't be given up now.
Good to have you with us tonight, folks. Thanks for watching. Well, we're less than a week away. You know what we're asking folks to do? Do something out of the ordinary. We're asking them to get in their cars and drive to somewhere that they normally don't do, and then stand in line and then vote. You know, in this push-button mentality society we live in, where iPhones have everything at our fingertips, you mean I gotta go vote? That's kind of the feeling you get when you talk to some folks. But the bottom line here is that we have to understand what is at stake and what has happened leading up to the vote. It's scurrilous. It is scurrilous what's going on in America. The results of Tuesday's midterm elections are going to come down to really one thing. No matter where you go all over the country, you hear, well, it's all about